Welcome to the 178th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Thank you. Today I have a special guest. The guest is Dr. Saray Stancic. She is a physician that practices health and wellness and lifestyle medicine in New Jersey. She has a wonderful story as well as a documentary that's going to be released early next year named Code Blue. I think you're going to love her story. I met her at the International Nutrition Conference in Washington, D.C., thought her talk was fabulous, wanted to get her onto the podcast, and so I'm not going to distract from her talk to tell you about her journey to plant-based nutrition and how it's changed her practice of medicine. It's just a refreshing interview to hear of other physicians changing their practice to focus on what actually can make a difference in reversing disease. I'll leave in the show notes where you can find her, but certainly check out her website, drstancic.com, and it's Stancic. The movie is codebluedoc.com. She's on Twitter at StancicMD, and on Instagram at Dr. Stancic. And you'll love all the things that she's posted and her website. And if you're in New Jersey and you need a great physician, she's the one for you. And I think you'll really enjoy it. As far as just week to week, what happens here on my podcast, I'm training for the Ironman Chattanooga. It takes place September the 30th, so this is the last big weekend for me, big long run, another long bike ride. Last week's long run and ride were good. I fueled with the Scratch Lab Concentrate on my run of 17 miles. That went well with some fruit. And then for the long run, or for the long ride, I did the bars that we made, which were a combination of dates, raisins, dried cherries, and walnuts, and that worked out really good. I'm finding that solid food works really well on the bike, along with water, so that's how that's going to go. So I think kind of made the decision to stick with that. Playing with the recipe a little bit. We have used Lara bars in the past and Bonk bars, but I'm really kind of liking the idea of making my own, so I can pick my own ingredients and kind of control them a little bit, and so I think I've got the consistency pretty good. A little help from my registered dietitian, Addie Dulaney-Meinrich, and you can again check out her website over on naturallyrootednutrition.com. But yep, things are going well as far as that goes. Addie and I will be headed out to the Plantrition Project seminar in San Diego to be inspired by more plant-based docs and lifestyle medicine lectures. So that'll be good. I have lots of information to give you. I also have another guest speaker coming up on the podcast, and I have a couple other good ideas, so lots of good podcasts coming your way. So I'm going to go ahead and let you listen to the interview because it's worth all your time, and I hope you enjoy it. And certainly if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with Dr. Stancic, and you can obviously email me anytime at jami@drdulaney.com. It's JAMI at drdulaney.com. And please visit the website at drdulaney.com. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Saray Stancic. Welcome, Saray Stancic. Dr. Stancic is a health and wellness physician in New Jersey, and I met her at Dr. Neil Barnard's conference a few weeks ago and heard her story and was so moved and awed by it, I wanted to share it on my podcast. So I'm not going to give a whole lot away other than this is going to be a fantastic story of transition. Another doctor who sees the light, and she has also seen the light so much that she has a documentary coming out. So welcome, Dr. Stancic.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be with you this morning.
So looking, doing the usual stalking, and of course I heard your lecture at the conference. You were in medical school, a third-year medical student. There's no stress involved in that. When all of a sudden your symptoms of multiple sclerosis started.
Yeah, actually I was a third-year medical resident.
Oh, resident, okay.
Yeah, I was on call on that night. It was October 11th, 1995, and as they are typically, very, very busy night, and I was really running around the hospital, just really super stressed, and it wasn't until sometime in the mid-morning hours where I finally found an opportunity to make it back to the on-call room, and I just passed out. I was so fatigued, and when I was paged shortly thereafter, I tried to get up, and I couldn't feel my legs, and so just like that, everything changed. I was brought to the emergency room, and an MRI confirmed a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis with multiple lesions in both my brain and spinal cord.
And I heard, when you spoke, of course, doctors are so blunt with other doctors. You just kind of got the ball dropped in your lap and said, "Oh, you have multiple sclerosis, and here's your list of medications you're going to need to take and get ready."
Yep, that's exactly what happened. Admitted to the hospital, and IV steroids were started, and then multiple medicines to treat all the other symptoms that I had: failing bladder, peripheral neuropathy, spasticity, pain, and within a few short years, I found myself dependent on a dozen drugs to deal with the side effects of the medicines I was taking and the complications of the disease itself. And I started to lose hope because I was deteriorating. And then just by chance, and here I was a practicing physician, chief of infectious diseases at the VA in New York, and teaching and active in academia, and I had no understanding of lifestyle and nutrition. And in 2003, by chance, I came across an article that discussed a possible connection between diet and multiple sclerosis, and I was really struck by it because no one had ever taught me that, and certainly none of my physicians had ever spoken to it.
I want to stop you just 1 second. So you're a third-year resident, and you get the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. Now, as a third-year resident, you went ahead and did a fellowship in infectious disease. So you could have stopped after your third year and hung your shingle and did a little, a clinic and kind of waddled your way through internal medicine part-time or whatever. But no, you went on and did a 2-year fellowship on top of all this.
I did. I refused to let this disease really compromise. Becoming a physician was a dream, and it was something that that truly I treasured. But I did make one modification. My intention was to go into gastroenterology, and I was talked out of that. I had two interests in medical school: infectious diseases, largely because of where I trained. I went to medical school in Newark, New Jersey, and it was that period that was coincident with the HIV epidemic. So I had witnessed so much pain and suffering from that, and I wanted to be part of that solution. And gastroenterology was the other subspecialty that really resonated with me. Ultimately, I made the decision to pursue infectious diseases simply because it wasn't a subspecialty. But it wasn't easy pushing myself through all of that. But somehow I made it through and completed my subspecialty in 1990, I guess, 9.
And, the next thing that comes to my mind is like, okay, so now you're going to expose yourself to all these people with infections and you're immunocompromised. It's like, okay, you're one tough cookie. But anyway, moving on. So obviously, very tough.
That's a good point. You're absolutely right. I didn't even think of that, but certainly that the medicines that we use in multiple sclerosis are immunosuppressive. So certainly that was a potential.
So you came upon an article saying, maybe nutrition. And of course, we don't hear much about that in medical school.
Yeah, so it's interesting. An article that was published in 1952 by Roy Swank in the New England Journal of Medicine, where he discussed a possible hypothesis that saturated fat was somehow playing a role in the pathogenesis of MS. And I was, again, surprised to find this. But, it wasn't just Swank's work. There were other bits of evidence in the literature that certainly pointed in this direction, that somehow those that consumed more animal sources of food and tended to have both increased incidence of MS and tended to have worse outcomes. So this theme kept surfacing as I searched through the literature, and I became very interested in it. And I remember turning to, my physicians, the experts in the field, and talking to them about it, and they didn't seem very impressed by it. They recommended that I continue the medicines as prescribed, but regrettably, when I followed the conventional approach, and I wasn't doing so well, largely because I continued to have exacerbations, probably 1 or 2 per year, and I was losing function. I couldn't feel my legs at times. I had pain. I had many issues with my bladder, and I was really not in a good place by the time I was in my early 30s.
And of course, a woman that looks healthy on the outside in her early 30s, saying that you have numbness places, I would guess that, not everybody took that as real in some instances. Other than you had the diagnosis, but it's very subjective in a lot of people.
It is. It's, right. There's definitely a spectrum. But for me at that point, because I had issues with balance, and I was at that point using a cane or crutches intermittently. And that was difficult because when I was practicing medicine, obviously, and seeing patients, and so patients would often ask, Dr. Stancic, what's happening? I'm a young woman. Why are you walking with a cane? And so that was, you didn't really want to talk about it, because then it becomes about me, and you're here and the patient is there to be evaluated for whatever reason, and so it would take up a lot of time. But yeah, no, it was clearly noticeable. I mean, I had the handicapped hanger. I had the disabled license. Car license plate, and I was struggling.
So what gave you so you read the literature and decided did you start incorporating more plans? How did your transition go as far as your nutrition?
Right. So as I continued to read the literature, and of course it was beyond nutrition, it was also exercise and stress. I was reading how those could play a role in the evolution of this disease. And again, when I went to my doctors, I didn't get that reinforcement, but I decided in 2003, based on everything that I had read, that I was going to focus on this idea of optimizing my lifestyle. So the first thing I did was I adopted a whole foods plant-based diet, simply because that from my perspective, objectively, when I read the literature, it seemed to me that a diet enriched in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds as being the ideal diet for human health. So that was the first thing I did. And so I didn't have the best diet. I was obviously a medical resident that was fueling on, Diet Coke and pizza or whatever was available. And so I changed that, and it was difficult. But to me, it was my quote unquote medicine. And I was going to give this my all. So I made those changes, and I started to exercise for the first time in a bit of time, because back in the 1990s, when I was diagnosed, at the time it was falsely believed that exercise would exacerbate the disease, because you would become symptomatic, like your symptoms would worsen. For example, if I started to ride a bike or walk for a long distance, over time I would lose feelings in both my legs. And so the doctors would say, don't exercise, conserve your energy. So I didn't do anything for about 8 years. So starting to exercise, at that point I was very deconditioned, so it was a slow build. But I decided to stick to it, and little by little I built conditioning, and I started to feel stronger. I tapered off of all the medicines, responsibly. And over time, I started to feel better. And it didn't happen in a very short period of time. It didn't happen in a week or a month. It happened over probably 6 months, a year, where I really started to notice significant differences, like days where I felt confident enough to leave my cane in the car, or fatigue is one of the most common symptoms in MS. I typically, by 7, 8 o'clock at night, I was done, and I started to notice that I had more energy, that I could stay up later. And so I was really encouraged by what was happening. And at some point, just to give you a contrast from where I was to where I arrived, these initial changes implemented in 2003, but by 2007, rather by 2010, I ran a marathon. So that was an extraordinary moment for me, because it validated everything I had done in regards to, optimizing my lifestyle. It certainly had borne fruit.
So, again, we have this pattern. Does a fellowship, despite being going to exercise, and not just exercise a little bit. We're going to run a marathon. So good for you. Good job. And that really is a tribute to your character through all this, because you had a lot of reasons to be depressed, and you weren't given much hope, but you kept going. And I think it's such a fabulous story, to hear your perseverance and your determination, and you had a focus. You kept your eye on the ball that you wanted, and you wouldn't let anybody stop you despite everything that's being said. So I commend you on all of those, despite your nutritional and exercise changes. It says something to your underlying character. So good on you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's just, again, your lecture, it was one of those, everybody stand up and cheer at the end of it, because was such a home run talk, and, fabulous story that just, gives everybody hope. It gave physicians hope, as well as, anybody in the audience that had multiple sclerosis. So, it's just amazing. So in 2010, you ran a marathon, and you were practicing infectious disease at that time, or had you transitioned?
I was still practicing infectious diseases. It wasn't until 2012 that I decided to jump over and fully commit to lifestyle medicine. Now, I can tell you that I wanted to do this much earlier in time, but people kept talking me out of it, saying, no one knows what lifestyle medicine is. You're going to give up a solid career in infectious diseases. And of course, the work that I did in infectious diseases was very important, and I'm very proud of it. But I felt like compelled to do this. It was something that I knew it was risky. I knew that I was going to take a huge cut in income. But I felt so impassioned to do it. In 2005, so I was at the VA, there was a program that came in called the MOVE program, which was really about bringing awareness to diet and exercise and stress in the veteran population, because of course the veterans are not immune to the chronic illness epidemic. And so when that program came about, I volunteered for that, to be the director at our VA. And it just fueled me. I just loved talking to veterans about their diet. And I started a walking group at lunchtime. And I was at the Hudson Valley VA, which is right on the Hudson River. It's just a beautiful setting. And at lunchtime, I just said, whoever wants to come walk with me will walk. And I started the program, and people just started to show up, and the group started getting bigger and bigger. And I could see how the vets were appreciating this time, not only that we were getting into physical activity, but it was also an opportunity for people to share their, whatever was going on in their lives. So it became like a social experience, and we all connected. And I started to see the veterans lose weight, and they started to feel better. And they said, Doc, I think I'm going to see my internist today, and we're going to be tapering my diabetes drug, and I'm feeling so great. And I started to see, this was extraordinarily powerful for me, but it was powerful for my patients as well. So I became this infectious disease physician who was evaluating a patient for their whatever hepatitis C or Lyme disease, whatever the patient was being referred to me for. I was addressing those parameters, but I was sneaking in the importance of lifestyle medicine into every one of those encounters. And I saw there was magic in that. And this was an important message that I knew most physicians were not talking about. And I thought to myself, what could be more important than relaying this message? And, for me, it's about, I want the future to look different. I want that neurologist who sees that young woman who's newly diagnosed with MS in the future to not only talk about disease-modifying therapies approved by the FDA, but also, just as importantly, speak to the importance of lifestyle, how important it is for somebody living with MS to, for example, have a healthy weight, to not smoke, to exercise, to, limit alcohol. We know that's in the literature that all of these, when we address these, we have better outcomes with MS. And yes, the idea of diet and the role a plant-based diet may be playing in MS is now a very, very hot topic in clinical medicine. There's a lot of research going on looking at the gut microbiome and its communication with the immune system. So I think that what Dr. Swine talked about in the 1950s, that somehow a plant-based diet was playing a role. Maybe we didn't understand it back then, but I think we're understanding it today. And I'm not the only person who's living this example. I can tell you that so many of my patients who are living with MS have seen improvements clinically by adopting a plant-based diet and adopting what we call a plant-based lifestyle, right? Because it's not just exercise, it's not just food, rather it's exercise and stress management and sleeping effectively and avoiding tobacco and reducing alcohol use. So I'm just so grateful that this has been so life-changing for me, and I'm really committed to this idea that this is a message we need to spread globally.
Yeah, I mean, when you said the risk, it's been a year since I converted my practice to full membership wellness lifestyle medicine type practice. And we do 3 nutrition classes here that I teach and give lectures a week. And now patients come that want to, learn about plant-based nutrition and exercise and wellness. And we do exercise prescriptions and wellness things. And it was a huge jump, after being, I was a cardiologist, catheterizations, pacemakers, and it was a real scary 6 months saying, okay, I'm not going to be doing that as much, or if at all. I'm going to be doing this, and I'm seeing better results. But it was very scary to hang up one hat, so to speak, to put on the other hat. I say, give up the catheter and pick up a spatula, and it was. Again, among my peers, a little pressure. So I was, when I saw that you did this, like, oh, this is another thing I have to talk about, because you feel like you're on an island as a physician when you're talking about these things, when nobody around you is, and almost to the counter, go ahead and eat what you want. We can give you a stent. The other thing that struck me during your talk was that I hadn't really connected the dots, although we know that plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine addresses a lot of lifestyle diseases and autoimmune diseases, but the risk factor for multiple sclerosis are essentially the same risk factors for coronary artery disease.
Yes, I think it's striking when you review the literature. That's exactly right. I think all of these, again, those cardiovascular risk factors that we typically intuitively assign to cardiometabolic disease, they overlap with MS, and not just MS, all autoimmune diseases. And so I think there's an understanding here that what is good for our heart is going to be good for our MS. It's going to be good for our rheumatoid arthritis, for our lupus, for so many other chronic illnesses. I mean, we know cancer, obviously, and even potentially Alzheimer's disease and other chronic diseases that we're seeing that are prevalent in today's world, regrettably.
Well, and, going back to the risk factors for, cardiovascular risk factors, young people don't really again, you've seen it training for marathons and doing your marathon that, people eat donuts and pizza afterwards, and I'm going to run off a bad diet. But when, we don't, I think multiple sclerosis needs to be, it's not in the forefront enough that, this affects young women. So this is a factor that, childbearing years, starting a family, starting a career, to be stricken with this disease that, may very well, at least the incidence could be reduced if we, adopted a better diet.
Oh, absolutely. And this, I've tried to reach out to the National MS Society. This should be front and center. This is information that should be on their website, and this should be discussed by all neurologists when patients come in when they're newly diagnosed. But from a preventive perspective, we have, all these MS walks and MS cycle, bicycle races to raise awareness and raise funding for MS. By the way, we're about to, in the fall, in October, we have Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Again, another topic that gets a lot of attention. We wear pink, and the Avon walk and the Susan G. Komen walk, and that is all about bringing awareness to mammography and breast self-exam, which of course is important. Early detection is important, but we don't take a moment to talk about the importance of diet and lifestyle in regards to preventing breast cancer. I mean, this is a message that should be getting out to our young girls in high school. It's very important how they're eating, and it sets them up for their risk early in life for that malignancy that occurs in their 40s and 50s. And I've been trying and writing to organizations like the Susan G. Komen organization and Avon, asking them and pleading them to please bring this up. This should be a topic that is discussed at every one of those gatherings. Women need to know that alcohol and excess weight and a poor diet is playing a role in the increased incidence of breast cancer.
Yeah, and with the estrogen, especially in dairy, and it's so prevalent, in everything that all fast foods and everything that young people tend to eat. And we know that breast cancer in young women in the 20s and 30s are so much more aggressive. And these are lesions that started maybe when they were 13, 14, 15, we don't know, but it's extremely important that we get this message out that, it's not okay to eat what you want, you're 40 and then think about, trying to get your act together. We need to really get this into young people somehow, some way. And now,
absolutely.
And of course, again, true to your nature, just talking about it is not enough. You've decided to do a documentary called Code Blue. So tell me about how that got started.
Well, it's an interesting story. My daughter, like 4 or 5 years ago, in school, wrote a little story. I think the topic was write a little story about your hero, and she wrote a story about me and shared with her classmates my diagnosis and what I had done, how I had switched my practice to focus on spreading the word on lifestyle medicine. And one of her peers, a good friend of hers, her mother saw the essay on the displayed in the classroom, and this woman, her name is Marcia Machado, is a filmmaker, and she was very interested. She knew me for a while because our daughters are friends, but she had no idea I had MS because I've been well for like nearly 15 years now. And she came to visit me and talked to me about my diagnosis and how it had influenced my career. And she heard my story, and she said, "This is an amazing story. We need to share it." And I told her, well, I don't know if the story is my personal story, but the story is that, for me anyway, is that doctors don't learn anything about this all-important therapeutic intervention. It's the most important tool in our toolbox, and we're not being taught it. And I want to change that. And that was partially what I was doing. I was trying to speak as much as I could and write articles and try to connect with the medical schools, bringing awareness to this, that why are we not taught this? This should be the most important thing that we learn in medical school. It should be on what we build everything else. It should be the foundation on which we build all else. And she said, well, would you like to partner and make a film, tell your story, and tell what you'd like to bring to the medical education model and how it could potentially change. And so we partnered, I guess that was in 2015, and here we are nearly 4 years into this project. And I'm really excited because the film is really about not only telling my story, but also bringing awareness to where we are today in with medical education, and telling the stories of this new generation, like my medical students and medical students across the country, and other lifestyle medicine physicians who are passionate about spreading the word about the importance of this intervention. And really, my hope is to shed light on this, I think, lapse, and hopefully create a movement or a sentiment across the country that people will want to get involved and bring and create a change, so that in the future we have doctors that are fully prepared and understand the importance of nutrition and physical activity and all the things we talk about in lifestyle medicine, to ensure that they speak to their patients about this topic. And I think that doctors can take the lead here, just as we did in the past with smoking. You know, in 1964, Dr. Terry, who was a Surgeon General, produced a document that told us essentially that smoking was contributing to heart disease and cancer and COPD. And for a couple of decades, we did little to nothing. You know, even in hospitals, when I started medical school in the late 80s, you could smoke in a hospital. And it wasn't until 1992 that the Joint Commission created a standard that required all hospitals to go smoke-free. I mean, it took us that long, but finally, once we did, it created a domino effect, because once smoking and doctors recognized that it need not be in hospitals, shortly thereafter, President Clinton signed an executive order requiring that all federal buildings go smoke-free, and then it trickled down to state and local, and then restaurants and bars, and now smoking. We've seen a significant decrease in smoking across our country, and smoking is no longer really acceptable. Like, from a societal perspective, smoking is no longer admired, or it's not considered cool. Nobody wants to be around the smoker, and I think that really began when we, in the 1990s, when finally physicians brought this and said, no, we need to change this. Society needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, I agree totally, and it was when physicians were kind of ready to give up smoking themselves. When I was in medical school too, even during my first year on faculty, which is at West Virginia University, at 1993, the pediatric cardiologist, if you went into his office, it was a blue cloud of smoke. And in the nurses' station, they still smoked in the nurses' document room. Again, it's very similar. A lot of physicians don't actually want to give up their ways of eating, so they're not quite ready to hang on to it. And
exactly.
I think that plays a big role as far, because we weren't educated in nutrition, but you found out and I found out. So it's not like it's a deep, dark secret. You don't have to dig that far. It's a matter of acceptance and, having and I think a little bit in the litigious society that we live in. I know when I first started this, I was scared to death that, if I had a patient that elected nutrition over a cath, and what happens if they had a heart attack and I was telling them to eat greens and it'll be okay. But, if they had a heart attack, do I have a leg to stand on? No. Right. So, it was with much trepidation that I would just be all over them to make sure that they were doing well. But it was scary. Now I'm very confident, and after you kind of see that you firsthand saw it, so you had confidence. But until you gain a little bit of confidence as a physician, it's a difficult change.
Absolutely.
So what's it like? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say we have a lot of work to do. there's still although, when for example, in Washington, D.C., or now in San Diego, we're in a room full of what I call enlightened clinicians, people who are well aware. But you know this, there's a whole world out there of well-intended physicians, extraordinarily bright and impressive physicians out there that have not yet seen the light and don't see value in this. And I think that we need to continue to reach out to our colleagues and present the scientific data that supports what we're saying. And of course, we're not saying throw everything out. We're not saying throw out all the advances and all the pharmaceuticals or interventions that are available to us. Of course, there's a role for that. But what we're saying is that this is really very, very important. And we all need to agree that this should be part of the prescriptive moving forward.
Yes, I do. Yeah, it is enlightening. My daughter's a newly practicing plant-based registered dietitian, so that was her first meeting in D.C. that I had taken her to, and she's going with me to San Diego, and it's like it's so uplifting to be in that room of like-minded people that you kind of get a big shot of adrenaline to go out and spread the message, because a lot of times you're fighting the fight every day, and it's like a big pat on the back. You can do it when you go to these meetings. So it's great. So what's it like in the day, in your health and wellness clinic? Do people come to you because of do they know what they're getting into when they come to your office? Or they're seeking perhaps an alternative way of medicine at this point? Or do they just walk in and you say, here we go? Or how does it happen in your office?
Yeah, no, I think, so typically most of the patients who come to see me have a good understanding about what I do. So most of my referrals are word of mouth. There are several physicians. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but I have about 32 patients in my practice who also happen to be doctors. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And it happened because at one point we had a patient in common, a diabetic patient that came in and changed their lifestyle, and we were able to taper them off medicines, and their endocrinologist calls me, and that endocrinologist wants to know more about lifestyle medicine, and that's really a wonderful thing for me, because I'm not only, they come in and they say, you know what, I have some issues myself. I have hypercholesterolemia. I'm carrying a little bit too much weight. I need your help. So they come in and we work together, and they improve their outcomes, and that is magical, because then not only is it that patient's improving their health outcome, but it's also affecting how they practice medicine moving forward. So that's been wonderful. So a lot of my referrals are through many of those physician/patients of mine who refer patients to me. Patients who I typically will speak to the patient before they come in, maybe 5-10 minutes, let them understand what we're going to do, and then they may or may not be interested. So my initial visit runs 2 hours, and the reason it takes that long is I do a thorough history and physical, and then I do a lot of education. So we talk a lot about nutrition. We talk about obviously all the aspects of lifestyle medicine, physical activity, stress. So it is a 2-hour visit, and may not be the right fit for every patient, but I do make it clear before they come in, this is what what you might expect. Is this something that you want? So if they say yes, then they come in and we get started. And this is I opened the practice in 2012, so I'm into my 6th year, and it continues to grow. And I just, it's just joyful for me. I used to practice in New York, and it's also about, assuring that I'm doing what, at this point in my life, what I love, and assuring that my lifestyle is optimal. My office is 2 miles from my home, so I often will walk there or sometimes ride my bike there. I have great quality of life, so that, again, that's an example that I want to show my patients. And I do a little bit of everything. I do house calls. I go to their homes, and we go food shopping together, and we prepare meals together. We do walk with the doc in our local park. I hike with my patients. We practice yoga together. So it's really, it's very, it's just a lot of fun. And I see people changing their lives. And this is why I went into medicine, to really make a significant difference in people's lives. And to see a patient that's been diabetic for 15 years and to come off of that medicine and to reclaim control of their health and is just a joy, pure joy for me.
Yeah, it does make the practice to, again, I was almost 30 years practicing traditional cardiology, and it's changed my love of, I read more, I'm more into it. It's a happier day. I look forward to every day. I don't mind coming to work. I like the interaction with patients. It's a much better lifestyle. I would,
Well, it's good for you and it's good for the patient, right? I mean,
yeah.
I remember the stress of my previous life, and I don't feel that way anymore. So that, but obviously the downside is that financially it's not what my previous practice was. But ultimately, I made a decision that I was going to do this for other reasons other than finances, and hopefully someday it will be financially sound. But for now, I'm just going to continue on my path and see what presents itself.
Has your, as an infectious disease doctor, have you changed your thinking on, or what is like things like antibiotics and even probiotics? Or do you prescribe probiotics, or do you more of a natural fermented foods? Where do you come down on those things?
Yeah, so as an infectious disease physician, it was always my goal not to prescribe antibiotics, right? Whenever we can. I think that's a huge problem, and it's the reason why we have multi-drug resistant organisms, because particularly in the 90s, we just overprescribed broad spectrum antibiotics, and so now we have tremendous problems in the field of infectious diseases. I can tell you, for example, C. diff, which is something I used to see as a young attending in the immunocompromised elderly patient in the ICU. Now we're seeing it in kids, young people, after taking a Z-Pak. And that's in large part because of overprescribing for many, many years. So for me, it's always, obviously antibiotics are very, very important. I utilize them, but very judiciously and sparingly. So I'm not a big probiotic person. I think the most important thing you can do is to eat a plant-based diet to encourage healthy organisms in the gut. But certainly for patients who are taking broad-spectrum antibiotics for an extended period of time, that's something that I would likely recommend. A patient with chronic osteomyelitis. But again, I'm not practicing in that realm any longer. I'm practicing lifestyle medicine. So when patients come to me and say, should I be taking probiotics? I say, well, let's talk about your diet. Your diet is probably the key and most important aspect that is going to play a role in creating a really healthy environment in your gut microbiota. So let's talk about that.
Great. And how about things like, the shingles vaccine? That's something I get quite a bit. And I'm, a little bit, there's more and more different, there's, a couple different ones that are coming out. And do you think they're for, everybody in that age population over 60? Or do you think nutrition plays a role in maybe making people a little bit more, their immune system's a little bit better?
Yeah, so I think that nutrition is the most important variable in anyone and everyone. So that's where I go first. In regards to who gets the vaccine, I think it really depends on the patient. I think we have to proceed with caution, particularly when we have these new vaccines that haven't been on the market for an extended period of time. But I think the most important thing we can do, even influenza, obviously influenza is an important vaccination, but above all, I want all patients to improve their lifestyle, because if they improve their lifestyle, it's going to improve and fortify their immune system. So we tend to turn to vaccines first and sort of ignore the most important variable, which is how can we strengthen and fortify our immune system? And undeniably, the most important way to do that is by doing all the things that we address in the field of lifestyle medicine properly, eating properly, exercising, all of those variables are so important.
And I guess when we wrap it up here a little bit, do you like to cook?
I do. I enjoy it quite a bit. I don't like the cleanup, but my husband's really good at that. So
it's nice to have a cleanup crew. If you can have a cleanup crew, it makes it even more fun. Yeah, I can.
Do you like to cook?
Pardon me. I do. I enjoy it. It's funny when we started. I started the nutrition class about 5 years ago. Before we actually changed the practice, so anybody could come in off the street, or if you were a member, or if you were a patient or not, and take this class. And we had room for about 16 people. And I told my mom, who's a very good Italian cook, I'm going to cook in front of these people, and then I'm going to talk. And she said, "You're going to do what?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm going to show them how to cook plant-based, food and things." And so, it can be a little bit, but I do enjoy it. I liken it back to my chemistry great days, when you're mixing a bunch of stuff together. So we have a lot of fun, and my mom's a good cook, my daughter's a good cook. So, but the three of us, kind of do the Dulaney girl cook-offs a lot. So we really enjoy it, and I think it's good for the patients to see, the doctor screw up and forget some ingredient. Sometimes it's a main ingredient, but it's, like leave the rice in the back room or something, But it's good to see that you can. It doesn't have to be exact, and you can still have a good, a good meal, and use what you've got, and the education. So we really have a lot of fun bonding with the patients, and again, my family, changing, previous regular, Italian or Irish dishes into plant-based dishes is a lot of fun. So we enjoy it, and I like to see to recreate things that if I see out, I want to give it a shot. So I do really enjoy it, and I think that's really important, to get people back into the kitchen and cooking and enjoying it with their family. Yeah. It's great. It's great family time.
Absolutely, it's so important. And you just made a really great point. I think it's important for everyone to understand that plant-based nutrition means something different to different people, and I think it's important for us to keep to our culture, our background, the foods that are. So I'm Cuban, my husband's Italian, so we have different favorite meals, but the point is that there are some unhealthy Italian recipes, but we can modify them and make them healthier. Like, for example, one of his favorite dishes growing up was broccoli rabe with Italian sausage and orecchietti. So instead of Italian sausage, we use cannellini beans, and we probably double the amount of broccoli rabe in that dish. And so all of a sudden that dish is much more healthful. It's much more colorful. We add some red peppers to it. And so we've modified it to make it even, more nutritionally sound. So I think it's important for us to keep to our culture and the things that we love and enjoy about being Italian or being Cuban or Spanish or Portuguese, whatever it is, that those meals that are part of your culture, just modify them and make them healthier.
It's been a real pleasure and honor speaking with you. Thank you very much for taking time, and I can't wait to see you again and hear you speak in San Diego.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you and your daughter.
All right. Well, you have a great day, and thanks again.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed that interview. It's going to be a fabulous documentary. Again, I can't tell you how much respect I have for someone that just kept taking punches and just kept fighting back, and now is making the world a better place with the knowledge that she's gained. So Dr. Stancic has my great admiration and certainly best wishes. So I hope you enjoy that. I hope you check out our website, check out the documentary. It'll be great. Again, check out our website at drdulaney.com if you have any questions about our practice. So she's in New Jersey and has a great lifestyle practice going on. We're down in Florida and have a lifestyle practice going on. I think it's maybe coming time that we're going to have a women's physician conference down in Florida. and get some of these people down here to talk. I think that, one of the great take-home messages that Dr. Stancic talked about is, when people are young, they feel very invincible, 20s, 30s, 40s. How could anything bad go wrong, especially if somebody's not overweight, and everybody else is eating the same thing? How could people be stricken with such terrible diseases? But it does happen. It happens to people at any age. Nobody's protected, but we can protect ourselves with good plant-based nutrition. So it's never too early to start. It's never too early to introduce your kids to plant-based nutrition. Certainly active lifestyles with exercise, stress management. So take good care of yourself. Again, everybody's worthy of good health, and you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. So I hope this. I hope you'll share this with other people, and take care of yourself. Eat your vegetables, and I'll see you next week.